The Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference is coming to Dallas, Texas, February 16, 17, and 18 in 2018. If you know of a better way to get the latest insider knowledge about crypto, to hear directly from the top minds in this field, to interact personally with 800 fellow crypto lovers, hodlers, investors, miners, traders, developers, and founders, then I'd like to hear about it. If you don't, then you don't want to miss out. Register today for the Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference. Go to bitcoinsuperconference.com and register today as a super early bird to get the lowest rates on tickets and hotel rooms. That's bitcoinsuperconference.com.
Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with Future Tech Podcast. My guest today is Erik Aronesty, the CTO of Vida Identity, Vida Identity. Erik, how you doing?
Very good.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So tell me about Vida. What do you guys do?
We are designing a passwordless encryption system that uses some aspects of social networking and cryptography to make it so that you don't have to type your password, and also to make it so that the files you have are extraordinarily secure. So how would that work? I go to log in. What does it recognize? What does it look for? So basically, the way it works is, ordinarily the way most key managers or password managers work is you have some sort of master password, and then you use this master password to unlock every single password that you've got and log into a website. And the problem with that is the master password now becomes your weak spot. Somebody who gets it can crack everything. Likewise, with files sitting at rest on your disk, an encrypted file system typically will encrypt the entire file system with a single key. So what we've done is we said, all right, let's encrypt every single file or every single password with a different key. And then what we'll do is we'll take those keys, shard them using Shamir secret sharing algorithm, and distribute those shards out to a series of devices. And then we do a couple of proprietary things where we deal with the management of hundreds or maybe thousands of keys located out on multiple devices, such that the keys themselves don't have to reside on those devices. Instead, merely the ability to use the keys resides in that device because that device has a private key that gives you the ability to use it. So there's some interesting stuff we're doing, and essentially what it means is if somebody breaks into your machine and you've got your files encrypted with our system, the only thing they could possibly get is anything that is currently loaded in active RAM. So if you're currently viewing a file, yes, they can take a look at it. If you're not currently viewing the file, it is at rest, they can't. In order to get access to that file, they would need to hack they would need to hack that machine and also hack one or more devices depending on the sharing scheme you used. Most people would be using, say, their phone as the key to unlock their desktop's data. That's a pretty typical scenario. I have a desktop, I have a phone. As long as I have my phone, I can get my stuff. If I lose my phone, then I have to initiate a recovery procedure, and the recovery procedure pulls the keys from a backup. And what's the backup? Well, in general, I think the best backup would be like my wife's phone. My wife doesn't get notifications or alerts, but if I lose stuff, I trust her not to steal from me or screw me over, right? So I think the general, rather than having your trust placed in like a Microsoft.com or a Cisco, it might be better to have your trust placed in a friend or a loved one, somebody who you actually trust with the keys to your kingdom, because you need it. Where else are you going to put your backup? I mean, you could stick it in a bank vault too, but then you're trusting the bank.
Makes sense. Quick question I've heard about sharding. What is it? Can you go into a little bit of detail, low level?
I mean, it's essentially the same technology that underlies stuff like multisig. So the idea is that you have a key that's split among multiple, or a secret in some way that's split, or a private key or whatever, that's split among multiple devices. I mean, it's not exactly the same as multisig. Multisig is actually multiple keys, but the point is that you have a thing that you're splitting into multiple keys. And the way the sharing algorithm works is that normally, let's say I had a really long password with 32 characters in it, right? But then I decided to split it, and I gave 16 to one person and 16 to someone else. The problem with doing that is there's some entropy loss. Now I have two 16-character passwords, right? And it becomes more evident the way it's split, and there's some weakness that you get, right? When you finally if you split it enough times, you wind up with like 2-character passwords. You give someone a shard. It doesn't really. It's not that person doesn't provide any value. So the way Shamir's secret sharing algorithm works is it restores the entropy by inserting basically a lot of randomness, so that when you hand two people different keys, those two keys are the same now. They're both 32 bytes long. So that kind of thing. Yep,
okay. So it's not like, ripping a treasure map in half.
It's not.
You put the two pieces together. It's each one gets like their own encrypted version of a map, so you can't correlate one with the other.
Exactly. You can't tell that they're both part of the same map. You can't hold them up next to each other and see that they line up. They're basically two completely different looking like maps, but neither one of them is the actual map. You'd need them both.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I've used like RoboForm or LastPass or that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you have hundreds of websites you got to log into, and you're right, there's a master password, and if you get in there, then you get access to the whole thing. So it actually is not secure because it creates a honeypot. Someone gets into that one password, and that's it. You get them all.
Yeah. And the idea is to take away the idea. Basically, the essential thing we're doing is we're removing the idea that secrets remain in your memory. And instead, we say the secrets remain on a device, a thing that you have and you hold. And we consider the best possible device to be a phone. And there's some disadvantages to phones. Phones can be hacked, right? Phones are weak in some ways. But there are some advantages to phones. And the biggest advantage is this. You know when you lose your phone. It's not something you're not going to be aware of. If I use a USB key, that gives me a lot of edge. If I create a proprietary device that isn't a phone, and this proprietary device only has a private key inside of it, and it only can, do the things it needs to do to unlock the shards of my files. And we talked about that, and we're probably going to build one, but it's not the priority. And the reason is that when you lose that device, you won't notice it. You'll just walk around with some other guy with that device, busily trying to hack your system, and you won't even notice that it's happening because he'll have that device and you won't care about it. But when you lose your phone, you care about it immediately.
This kind of
especially if the thing you're locking up is something like Bitcoin. That's the other thing, is a lot of this motivation. I don't know if you know Vida, if you know the foundations of the company. A lot of this motivation came around the fact that people were storing Bitcoins and they were storing things that were actually intrinsically valuable.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about the background. So where did all this come from, and what were the reasons that drove you guys to do this?
Yeah, so the founders of Vida were also the founders of a company that is involved with Bitcoin. I don't know how much allowed to say about that, but basically they personally were responsible for vaulting and securing Bitcoin. And so designing a new cryptographic scheme and a new way of securing data made a lot of sense. And then while doing that, it made even more sense for it to be a product that we could then sell or, to enterprises or to users, especially in light of things like the big Equifax hack and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you're relying on devices. So to access, your computer, you need your phone there. To access,
you need your phone. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that's basically the idea.
I've seen examples of like people, hackers calling Verizon and porting your phone number to another device.
But that wouldn't work because that's
security.
No, it doesn't. It's got nothing to do with the number. Basically, the idea behind it is that in order to get access to your stuff, you would have to hack the key ring that comes with the phone. So I don't know if you know what a key ring is, but basically a key ring is kind of like a LastPass built into a lot of devices, right? Windows has a thing called Windows Vault, and people on Linux tend to use a thing called secret storage, and phones have their own key rings. So every device that you buy these days typically has some sort of built-in vault of some kind, and they're not perfectly secure, but they're certainly more reasonably secure than just shoving it on a hard drive. Or, it's to hack into it, you would have to have a fairly large degree of access. Obviously, a rooted device, you're probably going to be able to get access to keyring. Maybe someone will tell me I'm wrong about that. I'm like, are you crazy? A rooted device, you still can't get access. I mean, people go through some effort to make these key rings secure, and I'm trusting that effort is probably greater than the amount of effort I can put into securing a key ring, right? That's the point. Is like, why not use that? Why not split your key and put it into these various key rings on these devices that you own, and then require ownership of that device and presence of that device to be contingent on opening a file. And I can have more than one device required, right? I could have my phone and my partner's phone for some really sensitive data, or some Bitcoins that my firm is custodying on behalf of other users, right? So now I have absolute security and surety, knowing that these Bitcoins could not possibly be spent unless me and my partner are signing off on it. That's pretty cool. And that's the idea. It's very similar to multisig, but now you're talking about any encrypted data, not just Bitcoins. It's Excel spreadsheets with financial information or whatever.
Well, give me an example. I want to go to my computer and log in and look at some encrypted Excel sheet. Like, what are the steps? What happens under your system?
So if you have our system installed, you go to a folder. And this would be like the V drive is what we mount an encrypted folder onto your system. It's kind of like a Dropbox. And you double click on the V drive, you see all your encrypted files, you double click on a file, and then your phone beeps and you look at your phone and a little box pops up that says, is it okay for this person to access, file, Excel, hello, whatever. And then you click OK, and then the file opens up. And if you click no, then the file doesn't open up. So it's a pretty straightforward, system where you're just getting an alert on a phone. If more than one signer is required, then you open the file and you get the alert and your partner gets the alert, and then he clicks OK, and then the file opens up. And we can actually create more complex schemes. So we can create situations where you've got maybe you're allowed to open this file, but only if an AI checks to see if you've badged in, right? So what we can do is we can give an AI the shard, and the AI could then check to see if you badged in that morning. So now, yes, you've got my phone. Yes, you're required to you have your phone, but let's say someone got me hostage somewhere and they're opening this file and they're threatening me and I have to click OK. Well, guess what? I didn't badge in that morning. I'm being held in a room, and therefore I still can't open the file. Like, you can create layers with this system, which is one of the coolest things about it, actually.
Or I guess for a company, if you're not on premises, you can't open the file even if you have the phone. That would be a crazy example.
Yeah, it's not. It's like a less crazy example, but I like the $5 wrench attack. I like trying to defend against that. I don't know if you've never heard that phrase, but the $5 wrench attack is something you want to think about when you're designing a security system.
Yeah, I never heard about that.
Yeah, so the $5 wrench attack is like a classic thing. You have a security system; it's really awesomely secure, but can it defend you from the $5 wrench attack?
Right. I have a kind of kooky idea I want to ask you about. Just sort of, how people are implanting little like rice grain sized chips in their hand.
Sure.
Why couldn't that be used as a device like this to access your passwords, or as a wallet itself? A Bitcoin wallet, or will that happen? Did that happen?
I think, given an implanted device like that, I think trying to get it to do anything more than, say, sign something, or maybe even encrypt something with a public. Well, no, I guess it would be decrypt something with its private key. Having it be able to do some basic operations like that would be pretty challenging, jamming that into an implanted device. But I think they could do it these days. I don't really know the state of the art on RFID implantation, or what the deal is with that. I know people implant RFIDs and they don't really do much, right? They just have a token, and then they're just like, yes, this is person with token. But they can't do anything but respond dumbly. And so they're not really secure, right? Anyone who can kind of sniff that RFID traffic and get a copy of the token and then imitate you without even being present. They can just ping your little device and get a copy of it. But if they're doing things like where they actually have some logic on board, then I think an implantable device would make a little more sense. It's a very, very small amount of logic. Encrypt, decrypt, sign, verify, that kind of stuff. That would work. That would be a functioning thing. And I know people have done it, but I think it's mostly just a stunt at this point. I'd find that to be probably useful in a way, but also on the other hand, just kind of creepy. I think probably it wouldn't.
So so back to your technology. So who are your users? Is it more enterprise? Is it individuals?
It is currently more enterprise, for sure. There is an aspect of individuals, especially where we're alpha testing this with people, like my dad, keeping his Excel files encrypted with it. And just, from a user interface experience, we tend to use people who are just friends and family, playing around with it, complaining about bugs and us fixing them. But, and it's certainly not, the product isn't ready for prime time yet, but it is functional and it's horribly secure. And those are good things. Making it friendly is kind of what we're mostly working on now. But yeah, so enterprises are probably more interested in that.
Yeah, what are some like enterprise use cases? It's not it's deployed yet, but
yeah, it's not deployed yet. I think the biggest use case is like a record by record. So imagine each record in a database being a quote unquote file. Now, when somebody attempts to access that record, they have to have the key for that record. And you can create permissions on a per record basis, which really gives you a lot of power for segmenting your data so that if somebody manages to snipe the whole database, they don't get anything. If somebody starts asking for lots of keys, you can shut them down. It basically, being able to have millions and millions of keys and manage them reasonably because you're not using a centralized password manager of any kind, you're using device security. That changes the game. It changes the security level many orders of magnitude greater than what you've got today. I mean, seriously, there's just like no comparison between. I work at a lot of big corporations. I don't want to point fingers, but I can say that most big companies don't have what I would consider enterprise-grade security, even though they are enterprises. There are certain silos within those companies that do a good job. Usually those silos are parts of the company that are responsible for vaulting or parts of the company that are responsible for custodying consumer data in a reasonably secure manner. They're going to be heavily audited and they're probably going to do a good job. But from day-to-day operations standpoint, most large companies don't do a good job. So that's the reality.
I can see, let's say the U.S. replaced Social Security numbers with some new kind of ID number, and every single new Social Security number was encrypted, and the person that number belonged to obviously had the power to unlock it. It would make things a lot more safe if those kind of things were hacked. Any of your personal data, if you could do this with it and assign a different encryption for each piece of it, then you'd have a lot more control of that data and whether to share it or not, and see if anyone's trying to access it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the Social Security number thing because it's tough. It's like, yeah. I mean, I feel like there's a bottom-up notion of identity. I mean, the name of our company is Vida Identity. One of the things we do is like for password recovery. Our theory is this: somebody comes into an office and they've lost their phone, they can't access their files. What's the best way of recovering their access? Is it to go to a central administrator and show an ID that maybe hasn't seen him before and maybe doesn't know him very well? Or is it to just ask his colleagues, hey, I lost my thing, can you guys reinitialize this device for me? And then like 3 out of 7 of his colleagues initialize the device with his identity. That's a greater level of security. And it's also cellularized, compartmentalized. You can't actually imitate anyone at the firm without knowing their peer group and who they are. And a person gets to decide what their own peer group is. So when I get my device, I get to decide I trust Bob at the office and Hal at the office and Kartik at the office to authenticate who I am. And I make that decision on my own. So I really believe, like, I don't know if you've heard the term cypherpunk. I really believe in the bottom-up notion of security. So security really comes from the bottom. It comes from peers and friends, the people who know who you are. It can't come from a central administration of any kind. So if the government wants to know, if someone wants to know who I am, and they don't trust me to say who I am, they can ask my friends, and they'll that's the right way of saying who you are.
What about including biometrics as an add-on to verification? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, biometrics are built into everybody's device, right? So our system, requires your phone to be present. Hey, if you turn on fingerprint encryption on your phone, That's great. So now you got to swipe your phone before you can say okay. That's your personal decision what you do with your device, and whether or not you include biometrics with that device. And the device that we're building is probably going to include the standalone device includes a fingerprint scanner. And it just makes people feel better that the fingerprint is swiped. But ultimately, the presence of the device is more important than the fingerprint. And the reason, again, is going back to the $5 wrench attack. My identity is not my device. My device, however, is a component of what I'm able to use to prove my identity. But a fingerprint is obviously gameable and hackable in ways that there's countless ways to do it, and it's not secure in and of itself. If you just required a fingerprint scan to say get into a website, then somebody could, I don't know, swipe my fingerprint off a glass, and then use that fingerprint, encode it using whatever the encoding scheme is of the device, and then send it up to the website and get in. But if they don't actually have,
maybe multi-factor and only for recovery, not for use.
Yeah, I mean that might work. Maybe for recovery, it might be okay. To require my fingerprint. Yeah. So if I'm saying to you, hey, I'm giving you a recovery password for my device, you say no problem. You bring up the app, and then I swipe my fingerprint in the app, and then now I am required to ask you and be present and swipe. That's cool. That's a reasonable security. I like that, actually. I like that feature enough. I'm probably going to start talking about people about it today.
Well, there you go. Great, excellent.
Yeah, I should have paid you for that one.
So how long? What's your roadmap look like? How long until you have a functioning version that's going to be in use?
It's really hard to predict. We're kind of in the early stages. Everybody wants me to say 3 months, 6 months. I think that's reasonable in that range. 3 to 6 months, fine. As CPO, you're under pressure to produce a viable product very quickly, but you're also trying to be mindful of the fact that you actually want this thing to be really, really secure, and you want to use best practices while doing so. And that, it's kind of challenging to do both at once.
I'm sure you're getting initial interest from a lot of different places that have heard about it. What industries are approaching you? What kind of people are approaching you that eagerly want to use this?
I think since we're in finance and we have a little background in the Bitcoin community, we're getting a lot of people who are approaching us are hedge funds and people who are custodying Bitcoin, people who own it, who are concerned about security on and don't like the idea of master passwords and stuff like that. Maybe encryption types. This is because the circles we run in. I don't think that. This is why I'm really glad that I get my dad on board and get his feedback, because I don't think this is limited to. I think this is actually a really important thing for everybody to be running. I think people really should care about the security of their data, and I want the day and age of trivial hacks into people's computers and exposing everything they've got to be over. I would like that to be something that's done, and we just don't. It just doesn't happen anymore. And the only way to do that is to really, really decentralize a product like this, if not us, somebody else, but to really decentralize it and not have these last passes and these honeypots, like you said, where people kind of go after them.
Definitely, yeah. Would there be a solution where, let's say you're going to register for a service or a website or something, right now you've got to provide all your information, to that service, and they keep it in their databases. And again, it can be hacked, and they have been hacked. Any way to do a product where you can verify it's you without giving a service your data specifically, or not having them keep it, not having them keep custody of it, reveal to them, verify you, and then you get back custody of it.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is who are you? Like, what do you verify that you have custody of it? I can verify that I have custody of stuff. I can stick on the blockchain. We were doing that for a while, a big random number, and then prove that I'm in charge of that big random number. And the blockchain is, reasonably distributed, so it'd be very hard. I can revoke that big random number. So then the website can go and they can say, yes, you do have access to this big random number. You are user, whatever that big random number is. And that's something that we have a product for, actually, but we didn't get a lot of bite on it as much as we did on the encryption product. And I think the reason is that identity is wrapped up in things like KYC and laws, and custodying the user's information is sort of like you legally required by the entities that we care about, like things like, brokerages and banks. So I could go to a bank and I could say, hey, you no longer need to custody the user's information. Instead, all you need to do is check the blockchain and then you can prove the user has access to this big random number and they're in control of it. And then you can issue the account information contingent on the access to that and log them in based on that and know who they are and kind of develop a relationship with somebody based on this big random number. And they go, that's a really great idea. And I love it because then I could deposit money to that account. And I would have no ambiguity about who this person was, except that it's entirely illegal right now. Like it's a great idea and it's really cool, but I can't do it. I actually have to have their information in a database. So then, what we're doing is we're providing a product that makes it so that the people who have to store this information can store it securely. So that even though they've got this big database, there's no honeypot there because every single record in that database is individually secured with a different key. So when the government comes and says, hey, show me all your records, they go, we actually can't unless you come here and work with us for like a week. But we've got it all. We can prove we have everything. And I think that's now legally allowed. So you can encrypt things really, really well. You can lock them up really tight. But you have to be able to respond to a government request. Here's person X, tell me everything you did. You have to be able to do that. That's just the law. It's a crappy law, and I'm not a big fan of the law, but the least we can do is make it so that people who are obeying the law aren't putting everybody at risk.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Well, very good. Well, so how do interested parties get in touch with you? I know it's early days, but, if they have questions or they want to propose a use case, maybe start working with you, what's the best way to get in contact?
I guess the best way to get in contact with us right now is just to shoot a message to sales@vidaidentity.com or maybe Erik@Vidaidentity.com if you want to talk to me, and we can get back to you.
Okay, well, very good. Erik, thanks for being on the podcast, and I appreciate it. The Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference is coming to Dallas, Texas, February 16, 17, and 18 in 2018. If you know of a better way to get the latest insider knowledge about crypto, to hear directly from the top minds in this field, to interact personally with 800 fellow crypto lovers, hodlers, investors, miners, traders, developers, and founders, then I'd like to hear about it. If you don't, then you don't want to miss out. Register today for the Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference. Go to bitcoinsuperconference.com and register today as a super early bird to get the lowest rates on tickets and hotel rooms. That's bitcoinsuperconference.com.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.